The Watson Glaser Test. It's a notorious test. You all have heard of it. You've all probably had to do it at one point. And you've all probably sat back and thought, I really wish that there was a tutorial. Going through some of the key questions, talking about some tips and tricks that I can incorporate to make my test better. Well, I heard your wish, and I'm here to say that today your wish has been granted. We're going to go through some of the typical types of questions that you can expect to find on the paper. I'm going to go through some tips that I've learned along the years to help answer critically challenging and demanding questions, and hopefully you can incorporate these into the next Watson Glaser test that you guys sit, and I hope they can be beneficial. Let's get straight into it. We can often think of the Watson Glaser test as being split. 40 questions split into 5 sections. We're going to go through each one accordingly. And the first section is assessment of inferences, recognition of assumptions, deduction, interpretation, and evaluation. So the first part of this series on the Watson Glaser test is going to be chiefly concerned with the assessment of inferences. So what sort of different types of inferences are there? This statement will be followed by a set of inferences that relate directly to it, and each inference can be labelled in 5 different ways. First, they can be labelled as true, probably true, insufficient data, probably false, and false. Now, you may be wondering, how does one determine between all of these? And they are really interlinked as inferences. So let's go through each one individually and try to understand and establish what differentiates one from the other. So let's start with true inferences. We can think of inferences as true if they are demonstrably true. So this is the idea that they follow from the passage beyond reasonable doubt. It's true if the inference that you're given in relation to the passage follows beyond reasonable doubt. You can conclusively say, definitively say that it's true. How about probably true inferences? Now, these ones are a little bit more tricky because you can think of inferences as probably true if they're more likely to be true than false. So there's something that makes you lean towards thinking that they're true. Something in the passage, some sort of information, something said, something given that makes you lean towards the idea that, this does sound like it's true. However, you cannot say that it's true beyond a reasonable doubt. There's still something there perhaps may not be enough information. There's just something that's holding you back from saying, that is definitively, conclusively true. So we call these types of inferences probably true inferences. And insufficient data. So when can you think of inferences to have insufficient data? Well, you think of them as having insufficient data as there's not enough information to make a decision based on either the facts that you're given or consequently the lack of facts that you're given. In inferences, you can think of an inference as having insufficient data if you are unable to make a decision because maybe something mentioned isn't relevant, maybe there isn't enough explanation or facts to do with the inference given in the passage itself. So therefore, you don't have enough information to come to an informed decision, and we can label it as insufficient. Okay, how about probably false? In the same way that an inference can be probably true, as in you're leaning towards it being true, the same goes for something that is probably false. So you can think of inferences as probably false if they're more likely to be false than true. However, you cannot say that they're false beyond a reasonable doubt. In the same way as probably true inferences. And the same goes for false inferences. Inferences are thought of as false if they are demonstrably false. So that means that they follow from the passage beyond reasonable doubt. You can conclude from the information given in the passage that such an inference is false if it is conclusively, definitively false. Okay, so that's all well and good, but you may be wondering, how do you apply that to actual questions on the Watson Glaser test? So let's go through an example question together. If you guys like, you can pause the video, have a go at the inferences and the questions yourself. Let's begin by reading the example question. 200 students in their early teens voluntarily attended a recent weekend student conference in the inner city of England. At this conference, the topics of race equality and means of achieving lasting world peace were discussed, since these were the problems the students selected as being most vital in today's world. So, as I say, I'm going to provide an inference. It will be up to you to determine whether that inference is true, probably true, insufficient data, probably false, or false. As I said, if you're feeling comfortable with this sort of thing, feel free to give the video a pause and have a go at the inference yourself. Or if you'd like us to go through it together, that's also fine. Get a gist of how things works, then just keep following along. So the students came from all parts of the country. That's the first inference that's been given. I'll let you pause the video now if you want to have a go. Feel free also to, of course, go back to the passage. That's essential, because without it, it's going to be very difficult. Everything is based upon the passage. So 200 students in their early teens voluntarily attended a recent weekend student conference in the city of England. Topics of race equality and means of achieving lasting world peace were discussed, because these were the problems the students selected as being most vital in today's world. So the students came from all parts of the country. Well, nowhere in the passage is the origin of the students mentioned. And as a result, since a topic is not brought up in the passage, or, as we previously discussed, there's not enough information to make a decision based upon the lack of facts, we can categorize this type of inference in this instance as one being with insufficient data. I hope that's clear. The second one, let's have a look. Some teenage students felt it worthwhile to discuss problems of race equality and ways of achieving world peace. If you're having a go, make sure you refer back to the passage, read it thoroughly, read it carefully, and you'll find that in one of the sentences, the topics of race equality and means of achieving lasting world peace were discussed. Indeed, this is a case beyond a reasonable doubt. We can see that the inference and information in the passage perfectly coincide, so we can categorize this as true. The third type of inference. The majority of the students had not previously discussed the conference topics in their school. So the majority of the students had not previously discussed the conference topics in their schools. If this were the case, the students probably would not have selected them as being the most vital in today's world. So you can see that in this question, in this inference, you're leaning towards a certain thought. You're thinking, right, if this were the case, that they hadn't discussed previously discussed the conference topic in the world, they probably wouldn't have selected them as being the most vital in today's world. They definitely do suggest that it's likely the case, but they do not definitively prove that that statement is false. So we can categorize that as probably false. As I said, with this one, with these types of inferences, probably true and probably false, they're usually the most difficult, as you're leaning towards it. You think, if they'd never discussed these sort of conference topics in schools before, why would they label them the most vital in today's world? So you automatically make that sort of connection. but you can't definitively, given the passage, you cannot definitively say that it is false. So that's what the probably false option is. And the fourth inference. As a group, the students who attended this conference showed a keener interest in broad social problems than most other students do in their early teens. Let the video run on a few seconds. You guys can have a go. We know that the students voluntarily attended. So as a result, there's an implication here that they are interested in broad social problems, right? If you voluntarily attend something, there's a sense of self-interest there. And we also know that the problems discussed were selected by the students themselves. So coupled with voluntarily and the problems being selected, it definitely does seem that they do have a keen interest. However, they do not definitively prove that the statement is true, but as I said for the previous example, there's a suggestion that it is likely the case. So yeah, we've got to be careful on questions like this because it's really easy to just miss out between statements that are probably true and are true. But what the most important thing is to think about is when you're leaning towards a certain sort of notion of truth and determining whether or not it's probably true or definitively true, the passage is key, and looking for definitive points in the passage to determine whether or not an inference is true is how you're going to succeed, really. And fifth and final, the students discussed many industrial relation problems. Now we can see that in the passage itself we have a sentence saying the topics of race equality and means of achieving lasting world peace were discussed. As a result, we can see that this inference is directly in opposition to the information we have in the passage. As a result, we can say it's definitively not the case and categorize it as false. So I hope that walkthrough was particularly useful. If you take these tips and tricks and use them the next time you come face to face with an inference question, I'm sure you'll be able to get through it. I'm sure you'll be able to ace it. If you enjoyed this video and would like me to continue on my Watson Glaser series of walkthrough and explanation, leave a like, even perhaps subscribe. I'm a cool guy, I'm a cool fella, and I look forward to seeing you all, virtually interacting with you all soon. Oh, and if you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments box below. Alright, take care.